Oh yeah. Killswitch Engage, baby. There it is.
Musically inclined.
Shit. Yo, what's up? This is Jay Dennis, and we're back with another Ranked and Reviewed. And can you tell who we're doing today? You know, aside from the title of the video, can we guess who we're doing today? We're doing one of my all-time favorite bands. Still to this day, top 10 favorite bands of all time, Killswitch Engage. And I have 6 of their 8 studio albums, but I don't own their first 2, so I had to print out these. I like to have props when I go over these because I don't have images to superimpose on the video because I have cheap-ass software. So bear with me on that. That's my process right now. All right, so what do we know about Killswitch? Aside from the fact that they have 8 awesome albums, they have 2 incredible vocalists that have been in their band. Both Howard Jones and Jesse Leach. I think that's Jesse's last name. I've been listening to Killswitch since 2006, and them, along with Trivium, were among the bands that got me so much into the more modern and heavy side of metal music. Aside from Linkin Park and Chester Bennington's heavier vocals, Howard Jones of Killswitch and Matt Heafy of Trivium, those were my first real introductions to metalcore and, of course, just heavier metal music that has harsh vocals. I had parents where one would say you can't listen to gangster rap, and then you have another that said you can't listen to noise, music where you can't understand what they're saying. And I ended up getting into Killswitch them on a technicality. You see, when I was a young teenager, I was a bit of a Boy Scout. I used to listen to my parents. So when I was talking to my friend in class, trying to get into some new music, and I was 15, he listed off some bands of some CDs that he had, and I saw Killswitch Engage. I'd seen their name in a guitar magazine before, and I think I still have that magazine, actually. And I was like, oh, what a cool name. What a cool set of guitar players it looks like they have. And I was like, oh, Killswitch Engage. One word affected my ability to get into this band as early as I did. During the golden age of metalcore, it was the word roar. I asked my friend, I'm like, do they roar? Not do they scream, do they roar? And he said no. So I said, all right, yeah, give me a copy of one of the CDs. And it was The End of Heartache. And what can I say except Rose of Sharon and Breathe Life, especially Breathe Life. I mean, that whole album did a number on me, but those particular songs, especially Breathe Life, I didn't realize a band could be that extreme and be that good. So to this day, I've gone through, I just bought their last 3 albums off their website. I don't want to go on Amazon to buy shit. I want to support the artist directly. And I've had all 3 Howard Jones albums since they came out. I bought As Daylight Dies and their second self-titled album, because they have 2 self-titled albums. I bought those when they came out. So at any rate, this is a very special band to me. I love them very much. They kind of have that perfect mix of where their particular style, I don't try to imitate it, and my music certainly doesn't sound like Killswitch, but the thing that rubbed off on me the most was that they are heavy and catchy and feel good all at the same time. They got a couple of, somber sounding tones in songs, but mostly they're pretty happy, heavy sounding. And I've been told that the music I write, the riffs I write, the guitar playing that I do, it sounds heavy and happy at the same time. So Killswitch must have rubbed off on me. So to this day, Killswitch Engage is still one of my all-time favorite bands. They've aged tremendously well, and they have 8 incredible studio albums to back it up behind them. And then one quick aside, before I get into the Killswitch Engage albums, I just want to say they have a side project, only one album that came out in 2011. It's called Hymn of a Broken Man. I think what's the artist called? Times of Grace. I think it's with Adam D, the guitarist, and then Jesse. That album's incredible, but that's not part of the ranking. I just wanted to give a nod to that side project. That album is heavy and melodically executed perfectly. There's more depth to that music, but Adam D definitely holds back on the solos on Killswitch because in that side project he actually kind of unleashes a little bit more. So really enjoy that side project. But let's get into me ranking and reviewing their 8 studio albums. Jesse, Howard, doesn't matter which vocalist, they're both awesome. But let's see by the end of this maybe who I prefer. So I'm going to go through the 8 albums, and at the end I'm going to go through my top 10 tracks. So at the number 8 spot, we have a piece of paper. We have their first self-titled album. Admittedly, this is the special edition cover. I couldn't find a good image of the actual just main version. I'm doing standard edition for all their albums, even if their special editions are awesome. This aged really well. It came out in 2000. It's the one I've listened to the least, but it's actually very easy to get through. There's really no weak tracks at all. Songs like Irreversal, which end up on the special edition of End of Heartache. Soilborn, which is the first Killswitch song ever created that I've read. Vita Infra, and then Temple from Within. A few of those tracks ended up on the following album. I wasn't sure whether or not to include this one because it seems like a roided out EP with a couple of tracks that made it onto their first major release, but it's a full album. It's over 32 minutes. It's 32 minutes long. It's got a handful of solid tracks. It's definitely more raw. Jesse sounds quite a bit more raw here. For the year 2000, this metalcore music with breakdowns and catchy melodies in the choruses, it's definitely ahead of its time. It's a heavier album, and the only reason why I rank it this low, the spread between the bottom and the top album are an 8.3, and then the highest album is basically like, I don't know, a 9.5. If I'm being generous, I'd round it up to almost a perfect 10. This album, this band, like a lot of other ranked and reviews I've done, have no bad albums. It's just preference, and even though the raw sounds really good and really organic, they become more refined over the years, and I'm a big fan of hooks. I like memorable lyrics, and this album just doesn't have as many, but from start to finish, it is easy to enjoy this album from start to finish. It kind of reminds me of Black Dahlia Murder's first album, where even though I rank it at the bottom, it's still a great first raw experience. My favorite tracks are Irreversal and Soilborn. And then the closing track, One Last Sunset's a pretty solid instrumental. I'll give it that. But there's no bad tracks on here. I mean, Temple from Within's solid. The last minute of Vita Infra is solid. And yeah, this is just a solid first release, but I think they get better over time. Definitely worth listening to. Number 8 spot, their first self-titled album. Next up at the number 7 spot, from 2009, we have their second self-titled album. I actually have quite a bit of sentimental value to this one. It was one of those albums that came out the summer after I graduated high school, so there's definitely quite a bit of sentimental value here. I was listening to albums like this, Suicide Silence's No Time to Bleed, Chimera's Infection album, and quite a few other albums, but this was up there with it. This one is kind of just marginally better than the 2000 self-titled album. It's my least favorite album with Howard Jones on it, but the tone of his voice and the mixing sound really good. They got more melodic on this album, which I don't condemn. There's still quite a bit of heaviness here, but some of these songs straight up sound like As Daylight Dies B-sides. Like, when you have 2 iconic albums with Howard Jones, it's hard to keep that momentum going. So this is kind of where they waned a little bit, and this was the last album they did with Howard Jones. So sometimes you kind of hear the ending, and it's reflected in the music. But songs like The Forgotten, Take Me Away, the single Save Me, and the closing track, This Is Goodbye, I still enjoy those songs to this day. Even if I listen to albums that I haven't heard in a long time, sometimes my favorite songs from back then still to this day are my favorites. So my first impressions back then sometimes carry on to today, but sometimes I find stuff, or I hear things as a more matured musical mind that I didn't hear before. But guitar solos and songs like Never Again are pretty solid, but it's just an inconsistent album. This is their most inconsistent album, where it's got a good couple tracks and it's got a decent track. I think this album might actually have their worst song on it, which Killswitch Engage is my favorite band, so a bad song is still decent. The song I Would Do Anything, I don't really care for it. I gave it a 7.3 out of 10. Being a little generous there because it's Killswitch and it's Howard Jones, but that's kind of one of the most poorly ranked songs I've ever given to this band. Lost is a decent song. The Return is a decent song, but just kind of like those slower, longer tracks that Killswitch still does well. Kind of weigh the album down a little bit. And then The Reckoning sounds just like a B-side version of Unbroken from As Daylight Dies. So that's kind of what I meant by B-sides. So at the number 7 spot, we have their second one. Definitely worth a listen to, but not one that I would introduce first for a new Killswitch fan. At the number 6 spot, an album that got a little better with each listen, their 2016 release, Incarnate. Don't have a whole lot to say except it's a solid album from front to back, no weak tracks, but not enough tracks that get like a 9 or higher to elevate it higher up. This and Killswitch Engage 2 are kind of tied, but I gave this one the advantage because there's just more consistency in this album, and then singles like Hate by Design, Cut Me Loose, there's just too many good things going on with those songs. The solo in Hate by Design, the chorus, the music video, when he goes, hey! Wow, that was poor. But he basically sings the chorus and it's heavy and he's like happy at the same time. It kind of just makes you feel good. And then the closing like 20 seconds of Cut Me Loose, that breakdown at the end is one of the heaviest fucking things I've ever heard, and I really enjoy it. Strength of the Mind is kind of one of the weaker singles, but it's still solid. Some decent guitar work in there. Great Deceit, We Carry On are great closing tracks. And then everything kind of in the middle is solid enough, but the bookend effect of Incarnate, where like the first 3 tracks and the last 3 tracks are all the best tracks. Everything in the middle is just kind of good, but nothing incredible. So I give the edge to this one because this many albums in, for them to release solid music with Jesse, especially him having writer's block. I did listen to this album when it came out in 2016, but I didn't listen to it a whole lot. So I listened to it a few more times now, and it ended up kind of growing on me, which is why I got to the number 6 spot. Again, top tracks, Hate by Design, Cut Me Loose, Great Deceit, and We Carry On. At the number 5 spot, this might surprise a few of you, one that I did listen to quite a bit when it came out, their 2013 release, Disarm the Descent. I've noticed a lot of people that do Killswitch ranked videos, they put this one higher up. I also noticed they put the first Killswitch album at the bottom, so we got a little bit in common there. This is another solid front-to-back album, but it came back better than Incarnate, and this was definitely an excellent comeback album. This was the return of Jesse after not being in Killswitch for 3 albums. This album is kind of not chock full of amazing songs, but the consistency in this album is just better than Incarnate. So Beyond the Flames, The New Awakening, In Due Time, 3 solid singles right there. My personal favorites on this album are Tribute to the Fallen, that's my favorite song, and then You Don't Bleed for Me, and then Time Will Not Remain. So those drop C songs that are played in the key of D minor, I believe, Tribute to the Fallen and Time Will Not Remain are the best tracks. I got a little bit of sentimental value to this album because it came out in 2013. I was listening to this album, I bought it on iTunes. I didn't have the physical copy. So I got a little bit of sentimental value here. I thought it was an excellent return for Jesse. Again, I think Jesse and Howard are both excellent. And yeah, this is just a solid release for them. And it really does show on this album. So, but it just doesn't have any beyond excellent songs enough to kind of elevate it higher up. So it's one of their more solid, consistent albums, but it doesn't have any of that iconic stuff that you're going to see on some of these upcoming ones. Next up at the number 4 spot, which is technically tied with Disarm the Descent, but I'm going to give the edge to Alive or Just Breathing, their first major breakthrough album. Last album with Jesse Leach for a few albums. I've been listening to parts of this album since the mid-2000s during the golden age of metalcore. I had My Last Serenade, Fixation on the Darkness, Element of One. I had songs like that on my iPod. I never physically owned this album, but I did have a couple of these singles going on. This is just a more refined, more melodic version of the first album. It got less raw, more melodic, but it came out very well. Just like the tone of the drop C, down-tuned guitars, mixed with Jesse's vocals with even more music that's ahead of its time. For 2002, putting out iconic metalcore classics like My Last Serenade or Fixation on the Darkness, like, we're kind of seeing a trend with these last three albums, from Incarnate to Disarm the Descent to this, where they're all solid albums that don't really feature any weak tracks, but it just keeps marginally getting better. Songs like My Last Serenade are among Killswitch Engage classics. They've stood the test of time. This album I've seen generally ranked most people's like top three. For me, it's their fourth best, because the next albums have just simply more staying power and more iconic hooks behind them. This one does a very good job. It's very mature, very ahead of its time. And remember, again, I'm talking about one of my favorite bands here. So even if I rank albums a certain way, it doesn't mean I have a whole lot of negative things to say. It just means the positives might be capped at some point. My personal favorites, again, are My Last Serenade, Fixation on the Darkness, the singles, really. Element of One, to this day, is still one of my favorite tracks. But then, you had some carryovers from the first Killswitch Engage album. You had Temple from Within and Vita Infra, which oddly sound marginally better on this album. I don't know if they got remastered or re-recorded, but they sound just a little bit better here. And Without a Name, another solid track. But this really is an album of a generation. This really is an album of what was to come with the golden age of metalcore. So at the number 4 spot, we have their 2002 release, their sophomore success, Alive or Just Breathing. The number 3 spot, this is where my opinion differs from a lot of other people's that I've seen. We have their most recent album, Atonement. To me, this is their absolute best album with Jesse. I think 8 albums deep, for them to put out material of this caliber is insane. When I analyze bands like this, I'm looking at it from many different perspectives. I'm a metalhead, I'm a guitar player, I'm a vocalist, I'm a musician, like I write music, and Killswitch Engage is one of my all-time favorite bands. So my perspective and my opinions on things are going to be a little bit different. I got a bit of a different lens. I would even argue, without even knowing some of these other people who make these videos, I may or may not have a more refined lens, but we're all entitled to our opinions. That's kind of the fun of this. But there's sentimental value, there's nostalgia. Not for this one, this one's still too new. But I'm bringing up the lens because of looking at music objectively. Objectively speaking, this is a better written album, in my opinion. I just said objectively, in my opinion. Whatever. To me, even if this album falls a little bit short in terms of like length, compared to, am I accurate? Yeah, Incarnate, Disarm the Descent, and Alive or Just Breathing are all just a little bit longer than Atonement. There's just too many catchy, well-written tracks on here. I also believe this is like the one album, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the one album that features a song that's not in drop C. Killswitch might be one of the most consistent bands with staying in one tuning, but they have a song here in drop A sharp. It's Take Control. I love that sound. It sounds like a heavy alternative metal song. Great guitar solo, great chorus. There's just a lot of high 8 out of 10 songs on here, like 8 out of 7, 8.7 and higher, getting to like the 9 territory, the excellent territory. Even though this doesn't open up with one of their strongest songs, it cascades into Signal Fire, which is easily one of the best songs they've put out in a long time. You got fucking Howard Jones on this song. The music video is awesome. The song itself is awesome. Us Against the World is an excellent follow-up song with an amazing melodic guitar solo. I don't know how people that reviewed this album overlook certain tracks on this album. It seems like they don't talk about them a whole lot. You also had Billy something from Testament on the song Crownless King. I've seen a lot of people say that that's a better feature than the Howard Jones song on Signal Fire. I disagree. I think Signal Fire is a much superior song, but Crownless King is still a solid track. I Am Broken Too. I'd rank that song higher, but it's just, I think it's too short. But it's still a good song. And then just every song on here is like, except for Unleashed, because it's just not the heaviest breakdown with clean vocals, best song that they've done. But it doesn't necessarily set the tone for the album, but the album is just chock full of way too many solid tracks like Signal Fire, Take Control, Ravenous. Ravenous has that Daylight Dies sound with that powerful chorus, that powerful melody. It just really makes you feel like you can take on the world. And then I Can't Be the Only One is a excellent, heavy, feel-good song. So this album has more guitar solos. It's got more catchy tracks that are grounded in heavy music. The second half of the album is where it really picks up. And it's kind of got that same hungry energy. This is kind of what really separates this from the last few albums. Sure, they were hungry in Disarm the Descent because they were making a comeback. Sure, they might have been a little hungry with Incarnate because they wanted to keep it going. But this, 8 albums deep, for them to put out music that sounds like hungry, like early to mid-2000s Killswitch Engage, to be present 8 albums deep, really makes this album elevate higher up for me. And that's why it sits comfortably at the number 3 spot. Atonement, heavily underrated album, my 3rd favorite. And then we get to the top 2. Are we really surprised that we landed here? 2 albums that defined an entire generation, that were paramount to my musical and personal life and just overall success in high school, and to this day still give me goosebumps. These are among a few of my all-time favorite albums coming up, and this is where the scores really start to jump up. It goes from like a high 8 to like a 9, or my French bulldog farted, or almost a perfect 10 out of 10. So at the number 2 spot, we have As Daylight Dies, the same album I bought from Target in 2006 when it came out. This is the same copy. I've kept it intact, a little bit damaged, but here it is. And remember, I'm talking about standard edition, but the fucking special edition to this album is just mint. Oh, man. So As Daylight Dies, how do you follow up an excellent album like End of Heartache, which you obviously know at this point is number 1? How do you follow it up? You double down on the things that kind of made it great. This one got a 9.1 out of 10. I also saw Killswitch tour this album. One of the best concerts I've ever seen. We had Chimera opening up for them. God, fucking good times, man. I came up during the golden age of metalcore and during the turn of the century with some of the new metal, even though I was in elementary school. But just the stuff that I got to see, like concert-wise, like I'm really glad that I got to see stuff like this. As Daylight Dies, this is Absolution, Arms of Sorrow, just 3 tracks in a row that get progressively better, where the heavy is heavy and then the melodic is super well executed and it's catchy. Howard Jones sounds incredible in this album. The music writing somehow got more complex, but like it still maintained its somewhat level of simplicity and ease of access to enjoy it, and it's just grounded in just it being easy to listen to. Does that make sense? The heavy got heavier in a sense, and then the melodic got catchier. My Curse, songs on fucking Guitar Hero. My Curse is one of the most absolute, perfectly well-written songs of all time. I had a friend who said he hated the chorus because it sounds too staccato. Yes! Alright, I personally banished myself to my outdoor patio. Anyway, I had a friend who said that the chorus sounded too staccato, like, "This is my curse!" But like, there's two versions. There's the music video version, which I watched on Headbangers Ball back my sophomore year, so I got a lot of positive memories grounded during a turning point in my life where I got into a lot of great new music, a lot of great new bands. Killswitch and As Daylight Dies was paramount to that. My Curse is just a perfectly well-written, heavy, iconic radio metal single with beautiful melodies, guitars, harmonies, the breakdowns, the main riff. You cannot fuck with that song. That's a perfect dime of a song, 10 out of 10. But pretty much, probably my all-time favorite Killswitch Engage song is on this album. To this day, the most underrated song, Reject Yourself, still my all-time favorite song, especially from Killswitch. That main riff, that outro, that harmony, the clean part. So we're getting into territory now where albums have perfect 10 out of 10 songs. What else? We have Break the Silence, which is a very, once again, overrated song, not overrated, underrated song. We have For You, Eye of the Storm, and yeah, those are pretty much the main tracks right there, but just from start to finish, this album opens and closes everything in the middle. It just has such a high level of intensity and power behind it, where they took the success of End of Heartache, they really capitalized it on here, and they made something beautiful, and they made something iconic here. There's a reason why this is still considered one of their best albums, and even though they've released so many albums ever since, As Daylight Dies, along with End of Heartache, is still considered to be metalcore gold. So a lot of sentimental value here, a lot of happy memories grounded here with regards to the X Factor and with nostalgia. This album still hits home for me. I never really fully understood this album cover, but I still find it charming. But songs like My Curse, For You, Break the Silence, and of course Reject Yourself really elevate this one towards the very, very top. But it doesn't reach the very, very top, because the very, very top goes to basically the hybrid theory of metalcore, End of Heartache. I bought the special edition at Walmart back in the day. So let's just go ahead and keep it at this. This is the actual standard album right here. End of Heartache. I listened to this album last week from start to finish, early in the morning, to kind of get me started in my day. And I don't know what it was, but I was kind of brought to tears by it, by how powerful, by how effortless and seamlessly executed the heaviness and even the melodic side of it really is. This, I know I said this about Alive or Just Breathing, but this is truly the album of a generation and of a subgenre. You cannot talk about metalcore without bringing up this album, the same way you can't talk about nu metal without bringing up Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory. While the subgenre and the magnitude might not have the same cultural impact or the same significance, for a lot of metalheads out there that were trying to bring the genre back, stuff like this really made us happy to see that metal still had a very prominent voice. What separates this album from a powerful album as Daylight Dies is you had a major vocalist switch, and Howard Jones just came out the gate just powerful, heavy, and just unapologetic. The music is super well written. There's more of a heavy edge to this album, so it doesn't lack melody, but it has just enough to where on the heavier side of things, if you really want to enjoy the music, but you also want to imagine yourself in a crowd hearing these songs live, it hits you all the same. I've heard a lot of these songs live, and they're incredible. Bid Farewell, Take This Oath, they are excellent live. Fucking When Darkness Falls. How could I go this far into a Killswitch Engage video without talking about pinch harmonics? When I was first getting into the intermediate stages of learning guitar, I found it super important that I learned how to do a pinch harmonic, and I was learning Killswitch Engage material to do that. But as powerful as a song like My Curse is, this one has Rose of Sharon, which is basically as big as like Darkest Nights or Through Struggle from As I Lay Dying, or why am I struggling to think of other metalcore bands? Power Trip or Pure Hatred from Chimera, like Resurrection. What are some other metalcore bands? Anyway, this album has definitely some of their most iconic material on it. It's got Rose of Sharon, kind of the Reject Yourself of this album to me, like the underrated song that not a lot of people talk about is Breathe Life, which is the song that breathed life into my desire to be a better guitar player, to get into metal, and enjoy the fucking harsh vocals of people like Howard Jones. When I heard him sing clean for the first time, I was like, not to reduce him to his skin color, but the man has soul in his singing voice. The man sounds powerful, and I actually got up close to him one time, and he actually shook my hand when he jumped out into the crowd once, so I actually got to be in his presence for a moment, which was really cool. You feel his energy, you feel his power. He's a fucking specimen of a metal vocalist, and just a vocalist in general. So Rose of Sharon, Breathe Life. you can't not talk about Killswitch Engage without talking about the actual title track, End of Heartache, which is the absolute pinnacle of perfection with regards to heavy melodic music. You know how hard it is to sing clean over a breakdown and it sound good? It's not easy. It's easy to scream because it's easy to complement that rhythmic aggression. But when you sing clean as perfectly as he does over the End of Heartache, it's like it's executed flawlessly. It's got that iconic chorus, it's got excellent guitar exercises between them, it's got that bridge, it's got that build-up that leads to that epic finale. I just get goosebumps talking about it. But then other songs like Declaration, which is just a guitarist's wet dream of an intro, World Ablaze, which has that powerful bridge, you know, let it all burn, powerful chorus. You got excellent little quick instrumental sections like Inhale and As Embers Rise, or And Embers Rise, which are great transition tracks. Wasted Sacrifice is another great song. So this album has a heavier edge than As Daylight Dies, so that might just be a preference, but just with regards to its place in metalcore history, the fact that they were able to execute their best album with a whole brand new singer right out the gate. To me, the worst track on this album is Hope Is, but the closing track, or the closing part where Phil Labonte of All That Remains comes in and does that closing breakdown with him, kind of saves the song. But every other song on here is just like near perfection, which is why I almost give this album a 10 out of 10, which is not easy. I don't give a lot of albums that score, but it's pretty damn close. This is probably my top 10 favorite albums of all time. This and Ascendancy from Trivium were the two albums that really got me into heavier music. So at the number one spot, without a doubt, the iconic End of Heartache. Best album. So real quick before I recap the countdown, like I said earlier, I think both Howard Jones and Jesse Leach are both excellent vocalists. Obviously, you could tell I might have a preference for Howard, but it's only by a little margin. I don't think Howard decimates Jesse in any way. I think Jesse's a fantastic metal vocalist, and his clean voice has that same power. It's just a different flavor. But Jesse and Howard both have the same skill set and the same ability to put vocals perfectly on heavy melodic music, metalcore music. So it really comes down to preference. I know some people like Jesse more, and I understand why. I personally prefer Howard, but I think Jesse's incredible too. So no hate, no disrespect towards Jesse. It's a preference thing. I think they're both incredible. I'm so glad Killswitch got back with him and they put out a couple more albums with Jesse. They're fucking phenomenal. Give me 1 second, I'm gonna go grab my other albums. All right, so to recap, from number 8 to number 1, least favorite to most favorite, we have Killswitch 1, Killswitch 2, Incarnate, Disarm the Descent, Alive or Just Breathing, Atonement, As Daylight Dies, and of course the number 1 album, End of Heartache. Metalcore classic. Killswitch Engage is one of the best bands of all time for that reason. And for my top 10 Killswitch Engage tracks, which you're going to notice a trend here, I'm going to break a rule here. I'm going to do a bonus track. This Fire. I fucking love that song. It's off the special edition of As Daylight Dies. This Fire is an excellent song. I had it as a MySpace song for a while. World Ablaze, Break the Silence, End of Heartache, My Curse, Rosa Sharon, Breathe Life, and Reject Yourself. You don't have any Jesse songs. Look, I got plenty of favorite songs with Jesse in them, but these 10 tracks are the ones that hit me the hardest. Obviously, if I had to include some Jesse ones, I would say My Last Serenade, I would say A Tribute to the Fallen, Cut Me Loose, Signal Fire, Take Control. Last thing is I also listened to Atonement 2, the B-Sides album, which they did for charity for coronavirus. That's a very solid album too. I think I gave that one like a 8.5 out of 10. Got 6 pretty solid tracks right there. except for No Devotion. That one's all right, but the other ones are pretty awesome. I Feel Alive Again's an awesome song. So thank you guys for listening, for watching. This is Ranked and Reviewed by Jay Dennis. Today we did Killswitch Engage, one of my all-time favorite bands. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to comment what your favorite albums are, what you agreed with me, what you disagreed with me, what would you have done differently, what your favorite songs are. Do you have any stories about concerts, who you met, what these albums mean to you? I want to hear it. I respond to as many comments as I can. And yeah, thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.